Adam, as always, it's good to talk to you, sir.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hope you had a happy 4th. I've just been looking at the numbers. We're now in phase 3 of reopening Massachusetts ever so slowly, which obviously includes Arlington. And we have 307 positive cases in Arlington, 44 deaths. And it appears as though, like the nation, the positive cases are going up, possibly due to testing, in part at least. But we have plateaued, thank God, as far as the death rate.
That does seem to be what the data is showing, and you look at the statewide data, and it seems to be saying the same thing. But I think we talked about it last week. I think we still have to remain vigilant, right? California seemed like they had it tamed, and they do not have it tamed now. And we're seeing what's happening in Texas and North Carolina and Georgia, and I'm going to leave out states, but a lot of other states that reopened before us and maybe weren't quite as vigilant are seeing spikes now. So yeah, I think a week has gone by since we last spoke, and the data still looks good for us, but I still think we need to be vigilant to make sure we keep it that way.
And as far as like gyms are concerned, are you concerned about that? Or are you keeping a close watch on that? Because obviously, if anything goes awry, we're going to pull back on these phases.
Yeah, I think I'm concerned with all of these new openings that it all be done safely and according to the standards that the state has laid out. And I think probably I'm just as curious as likely the business owners are of seeing how many people come back inside, right? How many people actually go back to a gym or a fitness studio or even inside to go out to eat? I think there's going to be a pretty interesting balance of what's allowed versus what people are actually comfortable with.
Tomorrow you have a community conversation, which is most interesting, especially when it comes to 20th century American history. And this comes as a result of a lot of people being very interested in this series of discussions that we have to have.
Yeah.
And it's about racism and housing. And it's very illuminating in the sense that there were a lot of things in place on the government levels, federal, state, and municipal, that pretty much promoted segregation.
Yeah, absolutely true. And, so we unfortunately, we were supposed to tomorrow night have a session that focused on the cultural assessment of the police department, but one of the presenters was injured in a bicycling accident. So we pushed that back to the end of the month. But like you said, we, in the first community conversation, just a few mentions of housing and zoning and the racial implications really created a lot of conversation in the community. So we thought, let's put together a session, have a very significant real community conversation around these issues. And amazingly, in just a few days' time, we've pulled together a really stellar panel of folks to talk about this. It's not going to be me. We have Catherine Einstein, a professor at Boston University, also an Arlington resident, who's done years and years of research on these issues that's going to speak to the topic. We have Manisha Butra, who formerly worked for the MAPC, former city councilor in Melrose, former mayoral candidate in Melrose, who's worked on these issues professionally for the past decade. And we also just added today Leon Andrews, who's the director of Race, Equity, and Inclusion at the National League of Cities, who we've been working with on training town employees on issues of race, equity, and inclusion. And he's going to join the panel as well. So I hope we're able to really provide a very informative panel. I keep saying to all of us organizing, and I don't think we're trying to advocate, we're trying to educate. And there is a history lesson that I think we want to create a baseline among interested parties of what that history is. And then once we understand what the history is, then we start to move to what are the steps we should take to address it.
It's very interesting because when you hear about the Housing Act of 1934 and you read the fine print in the GI Bill, this is stuff, I didn't learn this in history class when I went to high school. So this is very valuable for the community to know because redlining goes back a ways. Changing gears now, the Department of Planning and Community Development is seeking public feedback when it comes to zoning and industrial districts. Obviously, this is to promote commerce and the future of Arlington, correct?
Correct. This was a project that was funded. It's part of what the master plan recommended. It was funded last year, not this just immediate past town meeting, but town meeting a year ago in 2019. And it's a study, again, as you said, on the economic analysis and impacts of the industrial zones in Arlington. So yeah, so we're looking for resident feedback. We want to make sure that any zoning recommendations that come forward are fully considered, that we're getting the full impact of what, doing an economic analysis as well as understanding better what residents might want to see in those districts.
And some of those, the property seems to be worth way more than the buildings on them. And so you want to make it a little bit more flexible. I would imagine that is in large part the aim.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like always, we're looking to figure out the best way to promote highest and best use. And, defining highest and best use might be different in different people's perspectives, but seeing if there is a way to figure out what the community as a whole deems as the highest and best use of those sites, I think is generally the aim we're looking at.
Also, in the last select board meeting, it was brought up that the MIRAC complex, they're looking at possibly building 140 units on the MIRAC property to be run by MIRAC. 25% affordable housing available, and what seems to be so attractive when you read this proposal is that it goes to Arlington residents first. They have first choice.
So, yeah, I mean, I think they put together, between Julia Myrack and the Myrack family and the development team, they put together a very thoughtful, thorough proposal. And it still needs to go through all the proper vetting. And I know the select board will have comments, and I'm sure the ZBA and other town bodies will as well. But I think a thoughtful proposal. I think it preserves the history of the site. I think it improves the natural resources of the site in terms of the Mill Brook and makes it more accessible to people, and provides affordable housing, like you just described, with a first priority for Arlington residents. So a lot more to see and do on that project, but I think that's an exciting project for the town to consider.
Last question. I read in the Arlington List today, there was an alumna from Arlington High School who is bringing up the topic of the Native American statue, the Cyrus Dallin statue, just outside of Town Hall, between the library and Town Hall, and also, and I guess it's really how you define it, the mascot of Arlington High School, the Spy Ponder. Is that something that you're going to be discussing possibly in the future, or is it worthy of discussion? Because it's obviously very entrenched in the culture of the town of Arlington.
Yeah, I think it is worthy of a discussion. I know, speaking for myself, I'm always learning. My understanding is that statue, I know, was created by Cyrus Dallin, who dedicated quite a bit of his life to trying to amplify and really spread the voice of Native Americans, or at least through his art, amplify the legacy of Native Americans in this nation. So at least my understanding of the historical context of that work, it was it was really to honor Native American culture. But I think in 2020, we're being pushed to look at things through different lenses. So I think it's a valid point to raise, and we'll have to figure out the right way to have that discussion in the community.
Yeah, it just looks like things are so sensitive right now that it's worthy of discussion, only for the reasons that we're seeing on the news every night nationwide. Although it is very a much part of Arlington. So we'll see where it goes from there. Adam, I understand you're going on vacation next week? Yeah,
I'm not actually going anywhere, but I'll be home, not as quickly responding to emails, watching the kids for a week. So yes.
There you go. There you go. If that's a staycation.
A staycation.
They're better than vacations.
I agree. You have to sleep in your own bed.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Adam, as always, good to talk to you. Have a good week off, and we'll talk to you when you get back.
Thank you very much, Jeff. You too.